I'm going to make this joint out of maple and walnut. I believe it's a Malaysian Tangam joint. I glued up 3 boards to get a 2 1/8 inch maple square for the legs, and I'm using 2 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch thick walnut for the aprons. The ridge carbide dado stack is really the meat of this. This is what allows me to do everything I need to do. I use the inside and outside blade and 1 chipper. As a side note here, this dado stack is probably one of the nicest ones I've ever used. It is just top-notch, high-end, precision ground material. I'm really impressed with this. But anyway, key part of using a dado stack is making sure that the chipper blade and teeth go between the teeth of the inside and outside dado blades. Now I'm going to use my tenon jig for the cuts I need to make on the tops of the legs. First thing to always do, make sure your tool is accurate, and I'm going to set my blade height to 2 inches. One of the nice things about these tenoning jigs is they have micro adjustment knobs on the side, so I can get that lined right up. What I'm doing is I'm lining it up to the outside of the thickness of the apron. So I'm going to put my piece in. I've got those marks on there, and I'm going to cut one cut on one side. I'm going to flip it to the side, and I'm going to cut another. These are going to be the outside edges. That's what I'm really trying to set up here. Again, the insides of those cuts are where the apron is going to line up. The back of the apron is going to line up. So here we are again. I want to show it to you from the back side. I have a sacrificial piece in there to make sure I don't tear out the back of the leg. The other thing to remember here is that we're making a corner of a table. So we're going to have 4 corners, and we've got to have the grain oriented in the correct direction for each of those. So I have that crosshatch. Now I got to cut off that extra corner, and I use that little scrap piece just to make sure I am flush when I use my flush saw here to cut it off. And I'm going to clean up the cut afterwards with a chisel just to get it as flush and flat as I can. Any bumps here will keep the apron pieces from sitting flat. Now we come to the fun part. We have to cut the aprons. First step is using this paoli rule, paolini. I don't even know what it's called. It's from Woodpeckers. I got it at a yard sale. I just want to figure out how deep my cut is and how far the apron tail needs to be. And I have a scrap piece of wood that's the correct width of the tongue that it's going to need to fit in. So first thing I did was mark where the tail is going to be. I'm going to mark it again with a marking knife. Now I'm going to take that tongue spacer in, and I'm going to do the same thing. It's a little bit narrower actually than what the tongue is. That just gives me extra space. Mark that piece off, and that's where I'm going to need to cut. Now I wrap those cut lines around the sides of it to make sure that when I line it up to the line on my table saw, I'm able to see where I'm supposed to be cutting, just to make my life easy. Back at the table saw, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw a line that's parallel to the blade to the far end, so I can just have a good visual mark. Here I want to make the blade the height of the inside of that tongue, so I can make sure to get a good cut on the apron here. So you can see that I'm just cutting out the dado. I'm cutting up to my line, sort of inching up. And you can see that I'm left with a really nice dado cut. But I'm going to bring it back over here and just clean it up, make sure it's nice and flush. I did a lot more work on it than I actually showed here because I forgot to record all of it. But just cleaning everything up, making sure it's nice and smooth. All right, so now that we have that done, we're going to check the fit with the apron. It fits really nice. And once we have that, I'm going to use this paolini ruler again to measure the overhang at the top so I know what to cut out on the bottom so it'll fit down in. All right, my first step is to really transfer that height, that lip I need to cut off. Making sure that I do the same on both sides, and I'm going to cut down inside the first apron. Now I'm going to measure over. I don't know why I did it that way. It was just easier for me. So I cut to my measured line. I'm going to clamp it. Now I'm going to cut off the end. Once I get everything cut off, I'm going to just take a chisel and clean up that corner of the apron, make sure it's really nice and crisp. Now I want to insert it again. I'm just going to measure the corner. Where am I going to cut to make sure I get that right angle on the edge? So I went over to my miter saw, obviously just checking to make sure that I'm fit there. I'm going to cut the 45-degree angle on this side. Then I'm going to flip it over and cut the 45 on the other side so both sides are angled. And I'm just going to start testing and putting the pieces together to see how they fit. Now, because these pieces all fit together so well, number one is to make sure that you're putting them in at the same time. You can put one in, but it's really hard to try and put the adjacent corner on after the first piece is in because those miters should be really tight to each other. That's part of what's holding it. The other part that's really going to help hold everything tight together is that overlap at the bottom where it's butted up to the leg. That overlap provides more support because it's locked in at the bottom and in through that tongue. I'm going to flip the piece over, getting close to getting this all together. So now we're coming over to the farther corner here again, making sure that those pieces are lined up, putting them in together. A tap, tap, tap-a-roo, a little bit on each side, making sure that they stay tight to each other. Notice how tight that miter actually is and how those pieces push to each other. Now we're going to come over to this last corner. And getting that piece in is always a challenge because you'll see that as you're putting it there, that leg just tilts in a little bit and you got to make sure that you keep it straight. But that last piece goes in really nice and tight. And what I really love about this is once everything is together, you can see this is a really, really strong joint. It's not glued up. I'm going to dance around on it, shake it a little bit. That back corner came up a little bit. But I'm just really impressed with this joint. It looks great, and even unglued, it's really strong.